What is Integrate NYC?
Integrate NYC is a youth-led organization that stands for integration and equity in New York City schools and around the nation.
Okay, so I refer to funeral, but it's not a funeral.
We had a retire segregation party. So it's been 65 years since Brown versus Board of Education, and our students came up with a campaign this year. 65 years is long enough. It's time for segregation to retire. So we hosted a retire segregation party in Times Square.
But wait, in order to have
Yes.
a retire segregation party, that means that segregation has not ended.
Correct. 65 years after Brown versus Board of Education, and we still see segregation. In fact, segregation is increasing in many areas. In New York State and in New York City, segregation is a major problem.
And so tell me a little bit about what the organization is trying to do.
So our organization makes sure that the experts on the impacts of segregation, young people themselves, are at the center of creating transformative policy to create justice in schools. What we want to see is what our students have called real integration. That's not just about who is in what school, but it's about who and what we value in our schools.
Okay, so give me an example of what you're talking about.
So, for example, we see that our schools are racially and socioeconomically segregated, that students are not learning with each other, but that they're also not learning with the same resources. Oh, no, so you asked me what examples were. So in New York City, what we see is that schools are segregated by race and class. They are not getting equal resources, let alone equitable resources. Who is elevated in our curriculum, who is teaching in our classrooms, and who is criminalized in our school all follow a pattern of racial injustice.
Tell us how you really feel.
All right, I'm gonna say. Oh, you ready? You ready? Let me tell you what segregation in schools is a product of and a perpetuator of racial hierarchies in this country, which put white people at the top unfairly, unjustly, and people of color at the bottom. That's wrong, and it has to change, and we're going to change that.
And you're telling me that's happening in New York City public schools?
Correct. I think what's so confronting about New York City schools being some of the most segregated in the country is that we know as a city that we value our diversity. And that's actually something that New Yorkers should rally behind. Because we care about a diverse community, that's why we need to ensure our schools are reflective of that.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you feel needs to be said? I think you basically said it all. But...
Thanks. I could talk for a long time though. You said the intentional. In the conversation around schools, a lot of times there's a lot of important people when we talk about schools. Educators are important, parents are important, they're all important, but we too often do not listen directly to young people about what matters most to them. And if we listen to young people, we'll be able to make the most important changes that are needed today, and that's to create integrated, equitable, inclusive schools where all students are able to thrive.
So, your nickname is Zaps, right?
Yes.
So your nickname is Zaps. When I say Brown versus Board of Education, you say what?
I'm inspired by the bravery of civil rights activists who came before, who brought not just Brown versus Board of Education to the courts, but hundreds of other cases to challenge the racial segregation and inequities in our country. I'm inspired by that, and I commit to continue to do that work.